Hi everybody and welcome to our Sunday night live feed. Tonight's an interesting live feed because we're going to talk about a subject which all of us are probably aware of and one which we should all be taking note of. So we welcome you here to Child Protection Party live feed. Now we're asking you on this occasion to let us know what it is that your thoughts are in relation to the disappearance of William Tyrrell. However, we are asking you not to mention names. Now, most of the names that are involved in this particular case, the foster parents and the biological parents, are known and are easily found on the internet. However, we don't want to get ourselves into any specific trouble in relation to identifying those names on our Facebook page. If you do mention those names, that post will be deleted by Avery as soon as it appears. So before we start and how I have a conversation with you about the intricacies around all of this and why it is an important subject for us to talk about, I will also be introducing Avery and Clinton to you. So welcome guys, it's good to see you. How are you going?
Good evening, Tony and Clinton. I'm good. How are you both?
Well, I'm fine. I'm fine, doing very well. And it's a Sunday evening, what can I say? And we're meeting with the most important people in our lives, which is the people on Facebook. Clinton, how are you? Clinton's good. Clinton, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, sorry, things are going well in WA. I hope you can hear me now.
We can. Thanks, mate. We could just do some sign language. Getting very good at that. Thanks God for COVID. Yeah, it's good that you could be with us, mate, and also you, Avery. So I will be having a bit of an introduction in a second and just talk a little bit about some of these issues and what they mean to us as a Child Protection Party. Now, we were going to have, and we will still have, the voice of Alana Smith tonight. The reality is that we had some technical problems with connecting to Alana, so we apologise for that. But I was able to do a question answer type thing with Alana this afternoon, and there's a 15-minute spiel where Alana talks at great depth about some of these particular issues that we're talking about tonight. So I will do my bit, then we'll go to the Alana interview. And then if you wish to have any comments in the meantime, we will pick them up and we will discuss them. And then Clinton Avery and I will discuss them on the other side. So let's get going. So some of the key issues that we have around this particular case and why it seems to interest so many people is that the reality is that the child in question here was actually a child in care. Now, that should concern all of us, as it does when any child that's in care is hurt, damaged in any way, experiences any form of trauma, or dies or goes missing. Now, the issue around this child being in care is explained by Alana later on when I play that interview, but certainly it is a matter for all of us to be concerned about. The fact that a department that has a child in care decides to be less transparent about their involvement with this particular case and as to why this child was in care in the first place. And I do have some information on that incidentally in a moment, and how this has actually panned out in terms of the impact that this has had on the wider community. There are many people out there who are concerned about William's well-being, curious about what has happened to him. Is he alive? Has he been murdered? Or has he had an accident and someone has hidden that body? What other questions? These are all the questions that remain around this particular issue. It is important for us to recognise the fact that the Child Protection System wants to hide all issues in relation to what happens to all children that are in their care. As a result of this, Alana has done heaps of work in terms of helping people to understand that he was a foster child, that he was in care therefore, and that there are a lot of questions that need to be answered around all of this. And why is it that when a child goes missing, such as this, why isn't it that we can't tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, in fact, about what has happened around this case? You may remember that recently a little girl, Charlize, went missing Chloe went missing in where was she? In Western Australia. Now, we know all the information about that. The parents were interviewed, all that sort of stuff happened, and it was out in the open. And even though we were wondering about what had happened in terms of her going missing, we later on found out what that was all about. She was rescued. It was a wonderful outcome. But there was no mystery because this child wasn't in care. When a child is in care and they go missing, the mystery abounds. And the cover-up from the department in particular is extreme. And we at the Child Protection Party wish to shine some light, particularly on those sorts of cover-ups, so that the whole truth can be revealed and that we as a community can feel safe because the people who perpetuate some of these crimes are dealt with. Now, I just want to say also that it is important, when I spoke to Alana about this earlier, she didn't mention it in our recording, but when I spoke to her earlier, it is important not to jump to the notion that somehow it has to be a pedophile. It's not often a pedophile that does these terrible things. Often it is usually someone who is caring for the child. So let's keep that in mind. Let's not jump to everybody's a pedophile type stance. Let's just look at this with an open mind. But let's talk about some of these particular issues. Now, I wish to show just to remind us a little bit about what this is about and where we currently sit around all of this. The detectives investigating, so this is from a recent article, so this isn't historical, but detectives investigating the disappearance of William Tyrrell are conducting more interviews after a subdued end to the renewed search for the missing boy's remains. And now we all may remember that last year they reopened the case up in a sense, and they started to dig up some lands around where the foster grandparents' home was, to have a look at perhaps he may have been buried because there was an assumption that somehow he might have fallen off a landing and cracked his head, and then someone dealt with the body. So this is where we currently stand. New South Wales started their search, which have not yet yielded a major breakthrough. She and her husband have never been charged. That's the foster parents. Incidentally, the names of the foster parents and the biological parents are freely available on the internet. We can't talk about it, as I said earlier, but if you want to delve into that, please do. But please try to avoid blaming other people when there's a lack of evidence to substantiate their involvement in this case. I think that's unfair. The detectives are now reviewing evidence gathered at Kindle where the child went missing in consultation with forensic experts. There's a child was interviewed, another child, and that's fallen by the wayside. Neither the child nor the couple can be identified for legal reasons, of course. Now, this is the interesting thing for me. The foster parents have pleaded not guilty. So they've been charged recently with abuse of a child. We don't know who that child is necessarily, but I'm assuming it was a child in their care. And they have been charged with abuse of this child. Now, one of the issues that kind of comes out of all of this case is that if you, and I'm making some assumptions here, they may not be true, but if you've got money, if you've got finances, if you've got the wherewithal to deal with some of these issues legally and to keep your name out of the media, then clearly you're at an advantage to the rest of us. But if you come from a poor, low-income socioeconomic background, you're behind the eight ball to start with, simply because you don't have the resources available to you. The finger is pointed at you because of where you come from, and as a result of that, you are likely to get charged, even if there is little evidence to prove that you have been guilty. But people who have got money, wherewithal, and standing in the community, as I believe these foster parents have, then clearly everybody starts to kind of look the other way. I'm not suggesting for a moment that they're guilty of anything. That is not to be proven. But, you know, it is something I think that weighs on most of our minds. Now, I just want to come to this particular article. Tyrrell's foster parents will plead not guilty to assault charges against them in a case that will resume next year. So this is an article in December. The foster mother, 56, and foster father, 54, on Friday morning in a pleas of not guilty to the alleged assault of a child who is not William, as I discussed earlier. The couple's legal representatives entered their pleas in front of a magistrate, Hornsby Local Court, saying they would argue to have their case dealt with under the Mental Health Act. Now, this for me was an interesting turnaround, because somewhere along the line they're arguing that there are mental health issues in relation to the way they behaved with regard to another child that was in their care. Now that's fraught with danger, because one has to wonder whether, when William was placed in their care, were those mental wellbeing issues present? Did the department know that they had these mental wellbeing issues? Did the department make enough inquiries to find out what was the background of these people? Or did they simply accept that because they are the sort of people that they appear to be, well-to-do business people and so forth, that they were appropriate to be caring for a child? My guess is they probably didn't. So one has to wonder if they're going to keep this information, if they're going to not seek this information from people, then in the future they're going to be making some dramatic mistakes. So I just want to go now to the audio from Alana. Now, I need to say about Alana before we go there is that I think this is the most amazing woman, one of the most amazing women I have ever met. She's got guts, determination, willpower, and she has a fortitude that just is undeniable and is amazing. She's an incredible woman, and she's been through the mill in relation to this. As basically what one could argue is a relatively uneducated person. She hasn't gone to university or whatever. She is educated in so many other ways, and she fights for what she believes in more than anybody I know. And this is an issue that affects her because she herself was in foster care, and because she recognises that the system itself has a lot that it needs to be answered to in relation to this particular case, and the way she's fought this and the way she's won in varying, in certain areas, particularly in the courts, is outstanding. So I just want to go straight now to the Lana interview, and we'll talk about it further on the other side.
That the lead detective currently on the case, lead detective David Ladlaw, and those that are behind him have the best interest for the child in this case. There are other aspects that are going on concurrently to that, and we have the inquest into the disappearance of William. How I feel about that particular issue, Tony, is I'm very frustrated by the way that the coronial inquest has travelled. There's been a lot of stop-start to the inquest. William has now been missing for almost 8 years. So that's the better part of a decade. I do feel that there's been a lot of missteps made by the early investigation team. But without trying to look back, I have hope and faith that it's moving in the right direction with the right people for the right reasons behind it.
Could you talk a little bit about the department's involvement in this, and any comments you'd like to make about, that I don't know whether you feel comfortable talking about the fact that he was in foster care or not, but it seems to be a well-known fact now that he was.
Absolutely. I think that it's paramount that we all are aware that William was a child in state care. I do know, I have first-hand knowledge of the fact that New South Wales Department had tried in earnest to cover this fact up. They say and they claim that it is for the safety and protection and the anonymity of the children, although we must remember that this particular child is lost, missing, and possibly deceased. Anything else that may arise out of this case should be coming second, and William's health, safety and welfare should be absolute paramount, and being found that the department's position should be way down the ladder in regards to this particular case, in my opinion. I know there's been a lot of in-house and backstage fighting and arguing about who's responsible, who may not be responsible, and there's been a lot of effort put into the fact that it's not to be known outwardly within the services or those working within the services that William was a foster care child. Now that fact has, in my opinion, hindered the early police investigation. It had actually put barriers in the way that were unnecessary to finding William and those that may be responsible for taking or harming William. If police officers are asking on a national basis for assistance, it is very difficult for the general public to assist in a timely manner and an appropriate manner to be giving information when they don't know the relevant players. So we're not allowed to know who they are or anyone's names or the last people to have seen William per se. And so it makes it extremely hard, like I said, to give correct information when the police are asking that of the general public.
Yeah. So you've had a fair bit of involvement, though, just in terms of some court cases and some things that you've done in terms of challenging the system. And I think you've been relatively successful at that as well. Can you give us some overview as to what those cases were about and how you went about making those challenges?
Sure. So very early on in the case, those that did know and follow the case had a lot of suspicion. Something just didn't sit right. It was just very bizarre. And we've seen, myself and the advocates that I work with, we've seen many cases where children go missing. Most of the time they're found, and that's great. But in the circumstances where they're not, it's usually not this complex and hidden. And that raises suspicion for us. So back really like 2014, 15 and 16, I had been myself taking on a civil claim against the Department of Family and Community Services for a personal litigation claim of my own. I was a foster care child who had been left in an abusive environment known to the department, and I wanted to seek some sort of closure for that in a financial way. And I did that. On the back of my case, William had unfortunately disappeared, and that was in 2014. So I jumped straight out of my case and directly into the case of Williams. And within 12 months, I had joined a social media page called Walking for Warriors Missing Children. And that page has over 40-odd thousand people nationally who are not from any organisation. They are just a group of everyday Australians who have come together on social media to talk about issues surrounding child welfare, such as your own platform, Tony. These platforms are vitally important for people to engage with and to get public feedback about what might be happening with children on a day-to-day level and how we can go about assisting and getting engaged in those things ourselves. So if anyone out there is listening and they've never heard of your page or Walking for Warriors Missing Children, I would urge them to go over, have a look, get engaged in that. So I quickly, I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't at the time know what it was. So I had jostled for a full parliamentary, I apologise, for a full coronial investigation into the disappearance and handling of William's case. At the time, there wasn't any such thing as e-petitions, so we had to do that all in handwriting, so paper, the hard way, the long hard way, but I needed 10,000 signatures in New South Wales in order to get it into Parliament. And I was sort of successful in getting about 8,000, and Facts New South Wales Legal Division had called me on the phone one afternoon and said that they had heard that I was running a petition and that they wanted me to remove the wording of the petition that stated that William Tyrrell was a state ward.
All right.
And it was at that moment that I thought, maybe I am right.
I reckon so.
So in that meeting, I had actually refused to remove those words. I said that it wasn't conducive of a positive outcome for William by denying that the public true information around this child's circumstances, and hence the department said to me that if I did not remove the wording on the petition, that they would seek to take me to the New South Wales Supreme Court to have an injunction order placed upon me to prohibit me from discussing those details. I refused, as I said, and I ended up in New South Wales Supreme Court fighting that matter. I was self-represented and I won that case. I was proud about that. On 3 days later, on appeal, and is their right, New South Wales came back to appeal that decision and took it to the High Courts. It was heard in the High Courts in front of 3 or 4 judges, a panel of judges, and again the decision was upheld and Facts New South Wales lost for the second time. That case had made case law, R versus Smith, which also that I was proud about. Facts New South Wales didn't like those decisions, and I understand why. They had a lot to lose over this case. So they knew that they couldn't do anything other, that they couldn't, they couldn't appeal an appeals decision. They had nowhere else to go. But what they knew that they could do was sneakily go back into Parliament and change the legislation again in order to make it more difficult than it's ever been before to talk about children in state care. Now, although I had a positive outcome for this case, the minister at the time and those members of Parliament that backed that decision have now reversed any good efforts that I had made. And in New South Wales, at least, it is now worse than ever to discuss issues surrounding child protection.
Can you explain how they would have reversed that?
I don't think it's a matter of reversing it. Like, as I said, Tony, it was taken to court and heard fairly, both in the Supreme Court and the High Courts. Now, they're very cunning, the department, about what they do and how they do it. They knew that the best option that they had at that time was to try and put more legislation in place to try and prevent these things from happening. And that also affects media outlets and anyone else wanting to write social media posts or anything on any child missing in state care, regardless of whether they're deceased or not.
Right. So you're saying their reporting mechanisms were somewhat gagged as a result of that?
Absolutely. Yes, they were, Tony.
All right. Okay. Where does it's a unbelievable fight that you've been through, Alana, and given your own past too, I can imagine it's quite traumatising over time.
Certainly is taxing, Tony.
Yeah, I bet.
Yes, absolutely. And I suppose another thing that I'm really disheartened by is that it seems to me, or at least it feels as an advocate, that there are so many people out there wanting changes and positive outcomes for children, and as it should be so, but everyone seems to be looking for a messiah nowadays. They want change, but not many people are prepared to stand up and make that change.
Do you know why? I was talking to you earlier about how that's one of our greatest worries as well. Do you know why that's the case?
I have no idea. If there was an easy answer that we could, throw out there and fix it and change it, I would be all over it by now, Tony. Unfortunately, I would liken it to something like the bystander effect, which is a very real thing. It's just a psychological thing in nature. And I think the other factors for people within the child protection systems is that we've got the lay person and then we've got the professional, and so the lay person generally doesn't have enough education on these matters or enough knowledge to go about navigating the system, even if they wanted to try. It is so big and so daunting. Even the language and the documentation that these services use is just above a lot of people's knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's one of the things that I feel that the lay person is up against. But other than that, when we're talking about a professional sense, we have people such as mandatory reporters or hospital staff, all of those, medics, hospital staff, doctors, psychologists, all of these people who are mandatory reporters. but they also sign things that are called memorandums of understanding. They can't, they've signed the contract saying that they will not discuss, they can't talk to the media, they can't bring their company into disrepute, even at the expense of children's welfare. So people like yourself, Tony, and the history and your, you know, your background, Avery's background, are up against it essentially, because these are the sort of things that we can have all the will and the want and the desire to make changes, but we are gagged essentially. We are stonewalled in order to go about doing this for the best interest of the children. Unfortunate.
But don't you think that part of your objective, my objective, is to give all these children a voice, as difficult as that might seem?
Absolutely. I suppose from my point, and you're right, that's the key crux of it, especially children that are in the care system, because they don't have a voice. There is nobody representing them. There is no face on the media or the TV or the social medias to advocate on their behalf. And this is one of the things that these organisations, child welfare organisations, bank on. And I don't use the word bank lightly. The listeners need to realise that child protection is first and foremost a business. They make money from people's children, and there is no money in assisting positive outcomes. The money comes from broken families, broken systems that are in and out of the courts, in and out of the family courts, in and out of, you know, doctors and psychologists. And all too often, these people are not representing the child. And we hear I especially hear time and time again, families, mums, dads, aunties, uncles, you name it, coming with the same hurt and distress, that they have been traumatised not only by having their children wrongfully and forcibly removed from them, but having to then go into a system that is up against them. A lot of these children's courts, they don't require evidence-based information.
No.
So it can all just run off the back of a caseworker making an allegation. And that's another thing that I think really needs to be addressed. The family law courts need a complete tearing down, clearing out, and a complete rebuild and a restructure of what we're doing for these children, in my opinion, Tony.
So finally, with regard to William Tyrrell, what do you think there'll ever be an outcome, or there'll be some sort of resolution as to whatever happened to this child and why?
I have to have faith, and I do. Now, I started off saying that I have full faith and admiration for the now lead detectives and the strike force. I have to have faith that something will cut through there. I'm completely devastated that it's now 7 going into 8 years and possibly maybe into a decade. We don't want to see that happen. The stopping and starting of the inquest and the protection of certain parties that have fronted the inquest is quite staggering and bewildering, to be quite honest. I don't think that the right questions necessarily have been asked of the right people at the inquest. And I know, and I'd be safe to say on record, that I have witnessed downright perjury occur in the William Tyrrell inquest. There are certain people who I will not name that I believe wholeheartedly need to be recalled to the stand to be further questioned about what they may or may not have known at the time. That needs to happen if we are to have any successful outcome in this matter.
Does that include anybody from the department, do you think?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Just need to be clear on that.
Yes.
Yep, okay. Well, I just want to thank you for allowing us to have this conversation and for recording it, and we will duly play it back later on tonight. So thanks, Lana.
Thank you for your time, Tony. I really appreciate your time and all that you do within the sphere of the child protection system. And I just want to personally say thank you to yourself and Avery and all the work that you continue to do.
We appreciate that. Okay, we've got Clinton back now, which is good. He vanished for a while, so I was a bit concerned whether he was going to reappear. Do we have any? Okay, there's a lot in all of that. Clinton,
Yep.
you got any senses to any comments that perhaps you'd like to make in relation to any of that?
I think at the end of the day, somebody knows something about what happened to William and they need to come forward and tell what happened. I think that's the crux of the story. Somebody out there in Australia knows what's happened or where William is.
Yeah, I agree that it's hard to imagine that he just vanished into thin air, firstly, and that somebody, if he had died, then someone obviously had to dispose of the body. If he wandered off, then surely that he would have been found by now. But that there hasn't been any indication that anybody knows. I think one of the key issues for me that came out of Alana's conversation was the fact that there seems to be that at the coronial inquest anyway, according to Alana, the right questions were not asked, that people didn't focus on certain issues that she believes that they should have focused on, and as a result of that, the information wasn't shared. And there is the department's involvement in all of this. Clinton, I'm just wondering whether you or Avery have got any reflections on the involvement or the lack of involvement of the department wanting to shield these foster parents from scrutiny, and whether or not there was an issue, I think, around so if William was found, what would be the stigma associated with him, given that it was known that he was in a foster family? And I thought, what a hollow argument that is for kids that are in residential care and go to school. They get heaps of shit from parents and from the kids in particular because they are in foster care. So there's this notion also around stigma and the impact that would have. There's also, but I think more than anything else, there's the stigma that's associated to the foster parents and their lack of care. Seriously, if a child goes missing in your care, aren't you responsible for just that fact that the child went missing? What do you guys think?
Yeah, absolutely they are. And from something that Alana said, it seems to me that the way that child protection departments view their primary duty is to protect the child protection department, and then maybe we'll look after the kids. Yeah.
So the first port of call is really how are we going to look?
Yeah.
And then
what can we do to cover our arse?
And then what do we do to make sure that we're... And I think the interesting thing to me is that every time they do that, they often appear to be worse off. So they appear to be hiding something. There's something to be said for being transparent, and that is that you haven't got anything to hide. So why not be transparent? And also, I just want to raise this other issue. What do you guys think then of where the biological parents are in relation to this issue? That, did they have an opportunity to grieve? Do they have a voice at all in any of this process? What do you think, Clinton?
Well, they clearly don't have a voice, but they certainly should do. I mean, William is still their son. It's still their child. They still get a right. I mean, the parents' rights might have been removed through a court system, but 100% they should still have a voice in what happens.
Yeah, and the fact that they clearly in this case don't have a voice is in itself a crime, I think. I mean, how would any of us feel if we lost a child for whatever reason, and that we didn't have a voice to be able to express our grief, or even to look for answers as to why this child, wound up with whatever occurred. Like if he got killed, if he got hurt or damaged, or in some particular way. Why isn't it that we don't? We as parents would want to be heard around how that has impacted us, and we'd certainly want to seek some justice around all of that. So these poor biological family who can't even be named are left out in the cold, not knowing what to do, and being dismissed in this whole thing. You know, we don't hear much about the biological parents at all.
Yeah.
So, any final words before we close off on this? Is there anything in the comments?
In the comments, Tracy Cumberland, she mentioned that we should end qualified immunity. I'm sure you know what that is. Maybe you could take a minute or so and explain what it means.
Well, maybe we need Tracy to explain some of that. But
okay,
I would imagine that qualified immunity means simply that someone is immune from prosecution because, firstly, they haven't committed a crime, and secondly, maybe because of the standing they have in our community, that they're almost untouchable because they have access to money, wealth, and all that sort of thing, and that gives them a sense of immunity that the average person like you and I perhaps wouldn't have.
Well, according to the Australian Law Reform Commission, qualified immunity is protection against criminal or civil proceedings in relation to anything done or omitted to be done in good faith by the person in connection with the performance or purported performance of functions or duties, or the exercise of or purported exercise of powers conferred by this act. Now,
I'm not a lawyer, mate. I wouldn't have any idea what any of that meant.
In other words, that if the Child Protection Department, a police officer, does something in good faith, we cannot prosecute them for it. We cannot sue them in the court.
So what you're saying then is that if the department chooses to, in good faith, leave a child with a person who consequently abuses or damages that child, then they have this form of immunity.
Yes.
Because
that's the way I read that.
In good faith, they left this job. Well, how freaking crazy is that?
Yeah, and with Tracy saying we should end that, I'm not entirely convinced we should end it, but I do think that it should probably be amended because there's going to be cases when things do happen in genuinely in good faith. In this particular case, I'm sure that facts or DCJ, they call themselves now, Department of Communities and Justice, that they were just on an arse covering exercise. We're not going to mention that William Tyrrell was in care because it'll make us look bad.
And where's this sense of responsibility to? You know, this notion that maybe we didn't do the right things, the procedural fairness stuff. I don't know what it is, but in terms of assessing their foster parents, that perhaps we buried our head in the sand a little bit and we made a mistake about, well, clearly they must have, because now there's this other child that has been alleged was abused by the same foster parents. So what does that tell us? I mean, isn't it odd? Don't you guys think that it's odd that there's another case come up where the same foster parents have another child? So I'm assuming that since William's gone missing, I could be wrong, but someone mentioned that they thought it might have been his sister. I'm not too sure about that.
Yeah, Tracy Cumberland said that William's sister was removed from them, and it was after that that she. Yeah, it was after that she said. It was after that that she said that they should end qualified immunity.
Yes, well, go Tracy. But then the other question, of course, now is who is the other child for which they're now being alleged, they're being accused of abusing, and why didn't the system step in?
Yeah.
Earlier, simply, I would imagine that in most cases that I know of where a child is removed because of the suspected abuse, not necessarily proven, but suspected abuse, all kids are removed from that household and they're placed elsewhere. And that family, will never, ever have access to a child again, even if the allegations are disproved. So, but in this particular case, oddly enough, the department has decided that regardless of all of that, they're good enough to be foster parents, so they get another child, even though they've had the sister of William removed from them. That's the way I'm reading it. If I'm wrong, I guess someone else will tell me.
Yeah.
But doesn't it tell us straight off that there's a failure within this system in terms of evaluating who's an appropriate foster parent?
Yeah. Well,
And
somebody did. I can't see
go
the
on, mate.
comment, but sorry, I can't see the comment. But somebody, I can't find it at the moment. But somebody did mention that foster carers are often appointed without reviews being done on their how they're looking after the kids and their ability to actually be a foster carer.
And in this particular case, there seems to have been some issues in relation to their mental well-being.
Yeah.
And because that's come up now in this particular case. So what are the issues in relation to these foster parents' mental well-being? Were they there present in the first place? Was there a psychological assessment done of them that would have indicated that there were some issues? If that had been done, perhaps William would be present with us today and in another home, or even return to his family. Now, I did notice that he was taken because of drug use and domestic violence from his mum. Now, I don't know the mother, and I don't know what the direct issues were in terms of how she dealt with that and coped with all the circumstances around it. But if this proves to be a woman who could have had a child returned to her because she dealt with and managed all of those problems and was dealing with it all, rectifying whatever the issues were, then surely she would have been a better choice than the foster parents that he wound up with. And he may be with us today. I mean, their decision not to, perhaps, this is contentious, but their decision, the department's decision to not work with the family, the biological mother, I guess, in this case, has ended up in this terrible, terrible situation where we don't know where the child is. It's horrific.
Yeah. Debbie Baker has said that it is William's sister who had abuse charges laid against the foster parents. Debbie says, I don't think they have been given any other children to look after.
Okay. Well, on that case, all I can say is I bloody well hope that is the situation, because I think it would be catastrophic if they were given other children. So thanks. Was that Debbie, was it?
Debbie.
Thanks, Debbie, for clearing that up with us. If anybody's got any other details they want to put forward, please let us know. I just want to, when I was talking to Alana earlier today, I was thinking, God, Alana, your story would make a great story for a television series.
Yeah.
And the way she went to court and she battled with them and so on, and some of the things she said and did to the judge.
Yeah. David versus Goliath. Great story.
Man. I mean, I don't know much about Judge Berriton, but I bet you he doesn't forget about who Alana Smith is.
No, I'll bet. No, I've seen the letter that she wrote to him. Amazing.
Terrific stuff. Clinton, any further comments before we go?
No, I think the department has a lot to answer for William Tyrrell.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, and we will continually follow this story and others in relation to the kids that are in care, so that we can do what we can to give the people, the parents, caregivers, and the children a voice here at CPP. So, guys, did we have a topic for next week?
Not right now.
Not right now, but we will have a ripper of a topic for next Sunday night to discuss, and we'll pop that on our Facebook page. And I guess I just need to say, though, before we go, that we are seeking donations from people to help us in the election. So if you've got a bit of cash available, just go to childprotection.party. Without your donations, we won't be running a candidate, which would be rather sad. So if you could just help us out there, as much as you can afford, would be greatly appreciated. Am I not wrong, Avery?
You're absolutely right.
We also need members as well, Tony.
We need members, and we need dollars.
We do.
But right at the moment, our major focus is raising the minimum of $6,000 that we need to run two candidates. If we get 3,000, we can run one candidate. we might as well just set fire to the cash, because we'll never have a chance with that, because that candidate would be below the line with with all that entails. 95% of people vote above the line. We need 2 candidates to go above the line, so we need $6,000 minimum.
So, and the great thing about the Child Protection Party is that we're extremely transparent. So
Yeah.
we'll let you know where we stand at any given time. And I really liked, I just need to say this, that if we could bottle the enthusiasm of Alana Smith and inject that into 10,000 people, wouldn't we change the world? Hey?
I think we would.
Oh, she's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And she raised a really good point, which she touched upon in the interview. And that was that there is no greater issue, like we believe this wholeheartedly, but there's no greater issue than the well-being of kids. There just isn't. Yet it is the most neglected aspect of politics, oddly enough.
Kids don't vote.
Well, neither does the climate. But at the end of the day, we need to make decisions about what it is that we want to support. And if we want to support the well-being of kids, whether they're disabled, intellectually, physically challenged, or whether they have a learning disability, or whether they're being bullied at school, or whether they're being swamped by groomers on social media, or whatever the case might be, these are issues that concern us, aren't they?
Yeah.
And that we're passionate about, because we don't want kids to be hurt. We want stuff to be put in place that will prevent children from being harmed. This is what we're all about. And surely that deserves some sort of financial support and physical support, because in each state we're trying to build, aren't we, Avery? We're trying to build
we are.
A network that can work to have these things. Alana in New South Wales, and Clinton in WA, in that other country over there.
And we've actually got a question about that. Melissa has a party. Melissa, she says, "What about Victoria? How do they get elected there?" The thing is that in Victoria, we've got a good team down there, but we haven't got that many members. We need to get 500 members in Victoria minimum, so we can register the party there. If we could get that minimum of 500 people in Victoria, we can and register the party. Then when the Victorian election comes up, we can then run candidates for the upper house in Victoria, and the same for Western Australia, Queensland. Not Queensland, there's no upper house. New South Wales, all the other states and territories. We need that membership.
So, and we could, in this conversation I had earlier today with Alana, she was extremely passionate about the fact that, she cares about this immensely, and she fights in all sorts of ways, which is fantastic. And we do the same in our own way. But at the end of the day, if you want change to take place, you have to invest in it. And even if the investment is a bit of time, working with Clinton, working with Avery, working with myself, in order to get this to happen, then surely it's worth the investment, because there's no other political party that fights for the rights of children as we do. It just does not happen elsewhere. In fact, someone once told me we're the only party in the world, the only political party, registered political party, that works for kids. And I reckon we ought to be proud of that. Yep. All right, guys, it's been a fabulous night. Really appreciate every one of you being involved. And I just wish to finally say to everybody that's watching, if you could just share this post. If you're watching this on YouTube, could you please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and could you please share this particular post to as many people as you can, so they can hear what Alana has to say and what we have to say at CPP. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Look after yourselves. And thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. And we'll catch up with you next week. Bye, everybody.